everyone. Thank you for coming along today and joining our webinar. Today's session will be led by Sue Bott from Disability Rights UK, who'll be telling us all about the history of co-production. Just to give you a little introduction to get yourself active, in case you don't know who we are. So we're a programme funded by Sport England and led by Disability Rights UK, a disabled persons user-led organisation. So we work alongside disabled people to lead change in the social care, health and sports sectors in order to improve health and wellbeing outcomes for disabled people. And co-production is a really important part of the work we do. We're working really closely with other disabled people's user-led organisations and the sports sector to embed co-production in practice, ensuring that the sports sector works effectively with disabled people to co-produce solutions to inactivity. So this is just one of the many topics today that Get Yourself Active will be covering over the next 2 months in our webinars. We'll be hosting a number of short webinars every week that will cover a range of important topics, all to do with co-production. So the aim of these sessions are to support more organisations in both the sports sector and disability sector to understand the basics of co-production, as well as sharing good practice on effectively embedding co-production in practice. So we'll be recording these sessions and uploading them onto our website. Feel free to visit our website to view the timetable for the webinars if you want to book in any more. And you can also watch recorded sessions after they are live on our website. This is only a short session, so it'll only be about 15 to 20 minutes long. So because it's short, we won't be doing any Q&A today. However, feel free to email me if you do have any questions and we can get back to you after the session. So my email should be on the Zoom invite that you received to take part in this. So without taking up too much of the time, I'll pass over to Sue, who will begin this session. I really hope you enjoy learning all about the history of co-production. So over to you, Sue, when you're ready.
Okay, thanks very much, Lydia, and good morning to everyone. So this is going to be a whistle stops escape through the history of co-production. But if you are interested, there are a lot more resources online that you could look at your leisure. So where did co-production come from in the first place? Well, it was first discussed in the 1970s by rather a clever woman, much cleverer than I am, to be honest, called Elinor Ostrom, and she was a political economist at Indiana University. Very accomplished woman, actually. She won the Nobel Prize for Economics in 2009. So anyway, she used the term co-production to explain a situation that developed with Chicago. Apologies if you can hear my dog barking in the background. She's dreaming. I don't know what she's dreaming about. It's obviously something very exciting. But anyway, so there was this project in the 1970s in Chicago, because the police really weren't doing terribly well, and crime rates were high, and they noticed that crime rates were much higher when they took the decision to patrol around the city in cars rather than having police on the beat as they'd done previously. So thinking about this, Ostrom concluded that actually when the police were on the beat, then they were getting community intelligence. They were really working with local people on what local people thought and what worked best for them, and that's why the crime rate was much lower than it was when they were speeding around in their police cars, cocooned from the real world and not really learning anything. So the conclusion was that actually the police needed co-production, because the police needed communities as much as communities needed the police. On to the next one, Lydia, please. So the concept was further developed by another clever American, Professor Edgar Cahn, and he was a Washington civil rights lawyer. So they were faced with a huge problem in Washington on their youth justice service, which really wasn't very well at all. And again, crime was going up, with all the implications that had for young people. So he decided that the best way forward was to co-produce solutions with young people in Washington, D.C. And when he did that, got us on side with them and their families, and involved them on an equal basis, then the crime rate dropped. So result. Next one, please, Liddy. So what happened next? During the 1970s and 80s, it was really a promising start for co-production, not only in the US but in other countries around the world as well. But then in the 1990s, something happened and we stopped talking about co-production. And this was because at that time, you'd got the development of a concept called new public management. Now, this, I mean, it started life in the 1980s with basically leading economists saying, well, look, services should be all modelled on what happens in the business sector. And so, whereas people delivering people services and community and public services had always argued, well, actually, this isn't like producing a tin of beans. You know, the processes are rather different. But in the 1990s, it was new public management that really held sway. I mean, and not just in the UK, but in many other countries as well. And so what that was all about was really dividing up commissioners, service providers from service consumers, and never the twain shall meet. And so it was very much thought then that service providers knew best and that they need to speak to their consumers. Now, I don't know whether any of you listening remember back in the 1990s, but there was this comedy series on the television called The Brutus Empire, aired in the UK, and that was a classic example actually of new development, because what happened was that Brutus was in charge of this leisure centre, this outfit that had been outsourced from the local authority, and it was very much his empire. You know, he was in control, and he listened to the other staff if they were lucky, but he certainly never listened to anyone coming in and using the leisure centre. In fact, I used to think of them as a bit of a nuisance, really, spoiling his lovely leisure centre and the way in which he wanted to run it. So next, please, Liddy. So that was the 1990s. But into the 2000s, we started to see the rise of co-production again. This was very much because the 1990s really demonstrated that public services and people services really didn't work very well following the dictates of market forces and new public management, and so many people in the public sector in particular began thinking, well, we need to think of new ideas and how we can improve our services and make them better for the people who use them. And so co-production, like any good idea, raised its head again and has become popular again. And it's been increasingly put into practice across the public and voluntary sectors in the UK, but in other countries as well. So thinking about other countries, one example I might mention is Canada. And that's my daughter actually lives in Canada, so I'm quite familiar with this one. And they have a program. The Canadian government has a program called Co-Create, and this program reaches out to people who want to influence public policies and services. And involves them as much as they can in the design and delivery of services. But in the UK, the rise of co-production is strongly linked with the disability movement and the mental health movement, and has a lot been about social care, but also other areas as well. So the disability movement and mental health user movement. So the disability movement is an approach that advocates the social model of disability. So basically, I'll just give a brief introduction to the social model, but I think there's going to be a session on that, so you can join that if you want to know more. But basically, the social model says that disabled people are not disabled by a particular medical condition that they happen to have, but they are held back and disabled by the barriers that are presented in society and the attitudes that society has. So, you know, one good example I would give, a personal example, because I'm visually impaired. So if I go to my local swimming pool, I actually have to feel quite confident in order to go there, because I need to be able to see my way around it. And of course, the other thing is that I have my trusty guide dog with me to take me to the pool. And obviously my guide dog is not going to leap into the swimming pool, so, you know, needs to be looked after by one of the staff. So for a long time I wasn't really going to the swimming pool because I wasn't really getting anywhere with it. But anyway, I did do some work with a local swimming pool eventually. So it wasn't my visual impairment and all the long list of medical conditions I happen to have that was preventing me from going swimming. Yeah, it was actually the staff attitudes and their willingness to be able to show me around and help me out. So that was what was holding me back. So that basically describes what the social model is about. And another fundamental concept in the disability movement is that we as disabled people, we are the experts on our own impairments. So we don't want other people to decide for us, you're visually impaired, or you have a mobility impairment, and this means this, and this. Actually, we're all very a collection of individual people with all sorts of different needs. And going back to visual impairment again, I can tell you that something that works for one visually impaired person might not work for another. So, for example, I like loads of sunlight because I can see better. Bright light, that's the better for me. But for other visually impaired people, they would say the exact opposite. And the mental health movement has been developing at the same time as the disability movement, and very much the same kind of thing. People with mental health issues don't want to be considered by their medical condition. They don't want to be described as things like schizophrenics. It's all about how society reacts to mental health and what processes society puts in place to make people with mental health issues more able to navigate that society. And crucially, just like the disability movement says that we are the experts on our own disability in the mental health context, it's all about recovery and empowerment, and fundamentally it's about shared decision making. So not making decisions about people, but making decisions with people. Next one, Liddy, thank you. So the disability movement. So of course we have sought to bring about change and to embed co-production. And we thought about particularly social care, because many disabled people use social care services. We thought about that and how that should be developed with us in mind, with us at the centre, with us as equal partners with commissioners and providers. And so in the disability movement, we've seen this move right from the 1980s, when disabled people were, many of them were in quite large-scale institutions, to being able to live in the community with support, and that move would never have happened without disabled people saying, we want you, providers and commissioners, to work with us, because what you're providing for us doesn't work, and we want to deliver services together, so that we have services that do work for us. Now, at the same time as these concepts have developed, then disabled people's organisations to support the rollout of these concepts, and to give disabled people a place where we can meet together, and we can be in control of our own lives and get support from each other. So the first one of these in the 1970s was the Union of Physically Impaired Against Segregation, but there are many, many disabled people's organisations now, including, of course, this one, Disability Rights UK. So all these concepts have developed, and we've seen, as a result of the desire to co-produce, we've seen the development of personalised services, including individual budgets, where disabled people have had an equal say in what happens to them and how their support is provided. So we have seen the rise in co-production across the UK, and I think it's pretty fair to say that these days it would be difficult for anyone in social care to think about developing services without, at the same time, thinking about co-production, and this is increasingly a feature of health as well. And even during the current pandemic, we have seen co-production, which is remarkable, really, because in a crisis situation, all the good stuff tends to go out the window. But fortunately, it hasn't all gone out the window. So, for example, some of the guidance that has been issued by the Department of Health and Social Care has been co-produced by disabled people, and this just would not have happened a few years ago. So I think this concept is well and truly here to stay, and it doesn't only make sense in the context of health and social care, but it makes sense in the context of the provision of any service. And because I'm sure you know yourself, if you go into a shop, or I don't know, you go and buy a car, or if you go into a gym, you know, you've got views about how things should work and how they could better work for you. So co-production as a concept makes complete sense, not just for disabled people, but obviously it's pretty important for disabled people, because we often haven't been listened to in the past. But it makes sense for absolutely everybody. I mean, why would you deliver a service that the people who are using it find difficult and doesn't work for them? And going back to poor old Brutus in the Brutus Empire, in his managing his leisure centre, he'd have had a much easier time if he'd embraced co-production. So thank you for listening. Over to you, Liddy.
Thank you, Sue. I think you did really well to cover all of that in such a short time. There's quite a lot to get through. I hope everyone enjoyed today's session. I think it's a really great way to start off the co-production sessions that we're running by learning about how it developed in the first place. this is all really important to understand when you're implementing co-production approaches in your organisation. So leading on from this, next week we've got the CEO of Disability Rights UK, Cameron Malik, hosting a webinar around the social model of disability. So Sue touched on it briefly, but if you want to learn about the social model of disability a bit more, you can book onto that as well by going onto our website. And just to remind you, the recorded session will be available shortly afterwards on the Get Yourself Active website, so you could also watch this back or share with colleagues if you think it will be useful. One other thing as well, we are looking for organisations that have some good examples of good practice in co-production approaches or case studies. This is so that we can demonstrate co-production in practice. So if you have any examples that you'd like to share with us, or if you know any organisations that do, please let me know by email. This will be really, really useful and useful for everyone else as well. So when you exit this page, you should be sent to a page with a survey to complete. This should only take about 30 seconds maximum. So if you could take that time to complete the survey, would be really grateful, because this is useful for sort of developing and rolling out co-production training in the future. So thanks again, Sue, for delivering this session, and thanks everyone for taking part. We hope you enjoyed it, and feel free to book on for some more sessions if you want to see more. Thank you.